As a Californian, you get on Highway 5 to go to Los Angeles, and you just blast down that highway, and you might be driving for 6 or 7 hours, and you never really venture off into the valley, which is right there. You never see it. I think part of the project is to open other people's eyes. They're not really looking at the people. They're really not opening those doors and walking in. They're not really understanding the depth of the poverty that's there, the depth of, I think, government misconduct, wasting this incredible resource that's there.
I think California has always been the goose that just kept laying golden eggs, with vegetation and animal life so rich and full that the skies would get dark when birds flew over. It's just an enormous environmental paradise. But it was also seen very early as the potential for riches on every level.
You know, to see the canal run through the spine of the valley by itself is kind of amazing, to think about how it was built and how much it cost and what it represents. When we started, there was a terrible drought. I'll never forget driving around with Melanie one day, and we decided to stop and look at some homes that were being sold. It was a gated community, and there was a man-made lake that had been built. And here we are in this drought-stricken community. The farmers need the water. They're building these new houses, and of course everyone wants lawn sprinklers and washers and dryers, and they've created this giant lake, and then in the middle of the lake is, you know, water shooting out as if somehow you're in Las Vegas. You're in a place where water is like liquid gold, and somehow these kind of things develop. And then we began to be conscious that there were water wars, that farmers were wanting to have more and more water. There were restrictions. In fact, at one point, there was a big water march.
There were hundreds of workers, and we saw the farmers and landowners walking around with stacks of signs that they were giving out that said, "Water equals jobs," and other slogans. And so I went up to a group of workers, and I asked them in Spanish what the signs said, and they said that they didn't really know because they didn't speak English. This water march was just a publicity stunt to get sympathy for the farmers and their bid for more water.
One day we were driving and came across a huge field. All the trees, and these are mature apricot trees, had been pulled out and were now upside down with the roots of the tree reaching into the heaven. And there was a giant machine that was mulching all those trees to clear the land. And so we began to wonder, what's happening here? And finally we saw a house, and the man who owned the land lived in that house. And he told us he had been an apricot farmer, and it was a very good market. And then all of a sudden the market turned down. It was cheaper to import apricots from Turkey, and it had virtually destroyed the apricot market in the valley. Agriculture has become globalized, and so the farmers in the valley are deeply affected by that. Families that were often second generation, whose parents or grandparents had owned the land, were tired of farming. It's not an easy life, and so they began to sell the land. The land was rising in value. Why not sell?
It took off like wildfire. It was just the right time and the right conditions economically for that to happen.
You know, who doesn't want to own a home? It's a dream that people have. They come to America, they work hard, and someday you want to own a home. And I think that the dream is true for immigrants in the valley. With this boom happening where people were being told they can get into a house for no money down, don't worry about the loan, the price of the houses are always going to go up, and as we know, it was smoke and mirrors, and finally there was a bust. And now you can drive around and see these acres and acres of what once were going to be residential communities of suburban houses, and all that's there are the roads, newly planted trees, some sod, and vacant lots marked off where the houses were going to be. It's a big question, you know, what happens when you pave over farmland with new development and you don't even complete that development? It's going to lay fallow for a very long time, and then it means that you're producing less, you're having to turn to other countries.
How will we grow enough food if people are developing prime agricultural land. And the farmers would look at me and just say, well, we'll just get better technology. And then a number of them explained to me already that a lot of the farms were being pushed out towards the foothills where it's not that easy to farm.
One of the things that you begin to see is pesticides being sprayed everywhere, and that's a little bit scary. You both see the dangers of the application, but also you begin to wonder the effect that consumers might have. And then meeting people who had asthma from the unclean air. I went over to Kettleman City, which is a small city of largely Spanish-speaking people, many farm workers, and they had a huge percentage of children born with cleft palate and seizures, and they were right next to a toxic waste dump, one of the largest toxic waste dumps in the United States. And then here is this community that is affected by this tragedy of children being born with very serious health issues and having no voice. So you begin to wonder about this land and about the regulations and about the fact that everyone looks the other way, from the farmers to the farm workers to the politicians. For me, that's an important part of this book, to give a voice to these people living in these communities who are really the spine of the valley, the lifeblood of the valley, who have been hidden in the shadows. People who do have dreams for a better life and a better world for their children. They want their children to go to college. They want to own homes. They want better paying jobs.
It was an exercise in understanding and seeing inequality on a massive scale. What came home to me is that while I love the idea of prosperity, I don't think it should be on the backs of everyone else. We're all part of the same system. We are voters and we're consumers. And when we're armed with a little bit of knowledge, we can really change things to create a more sustainable lifestyle in California for all of us.